Good evening. These tapes were sent to us here at IGX Broadcasting by a Dr. Chesterton. We've not been able to reach him to confirm their content or validity, so we leave that up to you to decide. Without further delay, allow me to introduce for your consideration the Black Rock Archives.
Day 10, and it's been a success in every single way. The subjects started their work in the office area today and the results are incredibly promising. The IQ tests have shown a marked improvement, an average of 20 points higher in the group, with 11 even reaching 32 points higher than tests conducted before the experiment started. I was not here for the beginning of the day as I was allotted some personal time, so I managed to catch up on some reading and even got to finish a Netflix marathon I'd begun last week. I returned to the testing facility refreshed and ready to work, but there's been very little for me to do. I've transitioned from an instructor position, teaching the researchers how to use the equipment and monitor changes appropriately, to a more supervisory role. The team we now have is working well together and the number of misreported changes has dropped to none at all. So everything is running, well, like a well-oiled machine. Even Dr. Denon has managed to get some sleep as the load has been taken off him, with the addition of Peter from Morgan & Morgan Technical Group, taking some of the overall strain off of him. Despite Denon's initial concern that Peter's involvement would get in the way, Peter has shown himself to be a very capable administrator. He has a good rapport with the research team, and has managed to get Portland down to fix their monitoring equipment, so we shouldn't have any more repeats of the problem we had on day 7. Now, this is especially helpful, as those biojockeys can be a little hard to deal with, government backing and all that, but they are receptive to Peter, and I'm sure it has something to do with his background in biochemical research. Sarah still hasn't signed in, and Dr. Denon has requested 2 plainclothes security personnel to canvass her apartment. We've decided not to tell the other junior researchers so that they don't panic, but this situation has started to worry me. I'm trying not to see this as being something directly connected to us, but because of the nature of the work we're doing here, and its potentially devastating consequences, it is hard to keep the paranoia at bay. With interest from other research facilities and companies, potentially even world governments, if the severity of the risks here were to leak to the outside world, it could have serious implications. But I must focus on my work. Number 2 has remained in the comatose state that she entered into yesterday, with no sign of panic from the other subjects. She's been left in the bunk room and has now been fitted with monitoring equipment. It is a little strange that the other subjects have not even batted an eyelid with her in that state, or even acknowledged the security personnel who fitted equipment to her. Denon is now working on a theory that the symptoms are not as initially thought random, but they are in fact connected via some sort of magnetic field that is influencing each subject to ignore her. Portland Down's findings also seem to confirm this. They had previously taken 9 and 4's bodies for autopsy. This, and the tests that they have conducted with the object and the air in its containment area, seem to show that they were suffering from a high level of an unknown toxin that they're calling Beta-X. This toxin has the exact chemical composition of samples extracted from both bodies. This newly discovered compound, when exposed to a magnetic field that is generated to mimic the readings from the object, behaves in what can only be described as a mechanical way, attempting to connect together to form a coherent crystalline structure. Although a lot of this makes no sense to me, as it's not really my area of expertise, from what I can gather, the object is causing the subject's bodies to develop a compound that is connecting them together through the magnetic field that the object itself generates. We are working on some tests to work on this hypothesis tomorrow, so it'll be interesting to see how that affects the group. As for the rest of the tests provided to the subjects, the findings are incredibly interesting. The whole group has successfully managed to correctly answer and solve all problems put before them. After a few hours of going over the results generated, the overall consensus is that the subject's intellect has expanded beyond their educational or natural capabilities, with some of the subjects solving deeply complicated mathematical problems that were specifically designed to cause even the most experienced professors difficulty. This is wonderful news, as it means that we can potentially use this object to expand the human mind in a controlled setting, if we can neutralise the negative effects of exposure, that is. If Denon's theory that magnetic fields can be used to control the effects is correct, then we could potentially be looking at the biggest discovery of all time. If not, well, it could be devastating. Day 11. It's brilliant. Pure genius from Dr. Denon. He and some of the techies down in maintenance have rigged up a massive electromagnetic coil around the whole of the test area. How they found that amount of copper wire in such a short time, I have no idea. When an electrical current is passed through the coil, it generates a magnetic field in and around the coil itself. Because of this, we've had to remove all of the sensitive equipment and metal objects out of the warehouse that the test areas are situated within. After that, the test areas themselves had to be stripped of metal. To do this, we decided just to pipe a sleeping gas into the test area. Doing this meant that we could also take blood and hair samples for the guys in the lab. And we could do this without upsetting the subjects. We entered into the test area after the gas and the subjects had been removed, and began replacing every metal object from the tables and chairs to the brackets holding the walls together. Apparently, Denon and the guys from maintenance went down to a local machine shop yesterday and paid them a stupid amount of money to keep their whole staff on overnight, replacing all the metal support structures and brackets with plastic replacements. Then, this morning, they emptied every furniture shop in a 50-mile radius of their plastic chairs, tables, cookware, and everything they could. After 8 hours last night and 6 this morning, they were ready to test Dr. Denon's theory. Needless to say, Peter was not happy with the amount of money they had spent without his consent. He and Denon had a massive row in front of the research staff and the maintenance team. This went on for some time, but by the end of it, the argument, it seemed more like an ego thing than anything else, and this was becoming clear to everyone, even themselves. Eventually, Peter graciously allowed Denon to go ahead with the experiment, as he said the money had already been spent, so we might as well see what the result was and not let it go to waste. After the subjects had been returned to the test area, it was only a short time to wait until they woke and we could begin testing. I would like to take a moment here to officially praise the work of the maintenance team, especially Head of Department Mary Wilworth. Her input and skills were key in facilitating this drastic change in the very small window of time she was provided to do so. I'm aware that I have no sway over accounting or human resources, but if you don't give the whole of the maintenance team a bonus this quarter, I would be very concerned about who you think makes this operation possible. I only bring this up because the results of the experiment were so dramatic and incredible. Using the magnetic coil, we were able to bring 2 out of her comatose state. It also made the subjects much more capable at their hand-eye coordination tests. Their motor functions are multiplying with each incremental increase of the magnetic field. We clocked 8 throwing a cricket ball at 72 miles per hour, and 1 managed to bat it perfectly. In hindsight, we should have increased the garden space to accommodate this new athletic ability, although to our credit, we did not expect such incredible results. This increase in physical and mental capability is a massive breakthrough. It means that we have conclusive proof that we are making headway with the object, and this will net us more funding, and more leeway with Morgan & Morgan. As soon as he saw the results of the test, Peter was on the phone talking to his higher-ups at the company, and I heard the phrase, "Give the man anything he wants." And all of this happened before lunch. What a day. So, I'm going to go finish up my lunch, and I'll pick this log back up at the end of the day. Right, I'm back, and I don't think we could have anticipated this. It was such a heady moment. Perhaps we took it too far too quickly. Maybe Denon is rubbing off on me slightly. I didn't stop him either. So, from the beginning then. I returned from lunch with the other researchers and prepared to see what the next step of the test was. Dr. Denon explained that we were going to begin increasing the strength of the magnetic field around the test area, and that over lunch he had persuaded one of the local gyms to provide us with some strength measuring equipment. It wasn't a permanent solution, as Peter had already requested some laboratory grade equipment, but that won't be here until tomorrow. This was just so that we could get working on it. In the meantime, as Dr. Denon began to increase the power to the magnet, we sat and observed the best we could from the two-way mirrors, as all of the cameras had been removed for the experiment to continue. It was as we reached 30% on the electromagnet that all of the subjects stopped dead in their tracks. This was not the result we had expected, at all. And we decided to hold the magnetic field at that point so we could observe the reactions of the group. After 5 minutes of no movement from any of the subjects, Denon decided to slowly decrease the magnetic field. The general consensus was that if we incrementally decreased the power, we could find the sweet spot that allowed for maximum benefits without complete paralysis. This, however, did not work. After 10 minutes, we were at 0% and the machine was switched off. Still, this provided no change in the subjects. They just stood there and stared into space. After another 3 or so minutes of this, after we'd switched off the machine, the subjects began to walk in unison to the office area. that still housed the object. They then began to stand in a circle around the object. This was a very tense moment. Not one person outside of the testing area moved a muscle, or as I can remember, even took a single breath. This excruciating silence hung for what felt like an eternity. Although reviewing the recording equipment outside of the test chamber, it was only a few seconds. Then, all of the subjects fell to the ground unconscious. At this moment, someone in the observation room must have snapped out of it and hit the emergency alarm. It was this sound that finally pulled me back down to earth, and I suddenly became aware of where I was. I was standing, staring at the subjects through one of the observation windows facing the office area. I became aware of people running around behind me, but I was planted to the spot. Eventually a hand pulled me away from the window as the security team began opening the test chamber doors. In they ran, with their protective gear on, to survey the situation. I was bustled out of the warehouse and back up to the observation room. From that elevated position, I could see a swarm of brightly coloured hazmat suits piling into the chambers with medical equipment. At the same time, the object was being removed and placed back into its protective casing. This was the first time I had seen it outside of its hardened, triple-locked, lead-lined case. It was like nothing I'd ever seen before. It was black as night. No, blacker than that. It was almost as if it was sucking the light around it into itself and keeping it there. A black so intense it was hard to look at. But at the same time it was shiny. An impossible shine. One that defied understanding or comprehension. So dark and yet so light at the same time. Terrifying, but impossibly beautiful.
Thank you very much for listening to the Black Rock Archives. If you would like to know more about the archives or us here at IGX, you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, SoundCloud and Twitter. Thank you again, and remember, the truth is there, you just have to find it.